All right.
Where are we?
I don't know. Oh boy. Hopefully this works. This is different, right?
This is very different, but it's good different.
It is good different. How's everybody doing? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. A little tired.
A little tired.
Yeah.
The audience doesn't know what time this is. It's later than usual.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Harvest, where we discuss everything cinema and story, and as we learn, you learn. As we grow, you grow. My name is Xavier Garcia.
And I'm Jonathan Garcia.
Now, this is part 2 in our story writing series. We're continuing our discussion from last week, where we covered some of the basics of our process for setting up and preparing to embark on our journey of writing. This week, we will focus on what happens after that setup, our actual writing process, and how we create content for every project. Again, we should reiterate, what works for us may not work for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Nevertheless, over the course of many, many projects scripted for commercial advertising, for on-stage theater, and for film, we've discerned that there's a little bit of truth being preached by all of your major screenplay gurus, ranging from the McKees to, yes, even the Blake Snyders. And we're here to talk about it.
Yeah.
You ready?
I'm ready. I got my water.
Let's do it. Now, first and foremost, let's address the elephant in the room.
What elephant? I don't know what you're talking about.
The whole room is an elephant.
Oh, right.
So, those of you that are watching on YouTube, I know that this is broadcasted via Spotify and Apple Podcast and Google Play and whatnot, but those of you that are watching on YouTube are realizing, hey, this looks a little different. We're not even sure if the quality is going to be the same because the lighting, obviously, it's not studio lighting.
Right. No, we are in a hotel.
We are.
We're in a project.
Yes, we're in the middle of a project, working on a documentary, and we are in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So we're not in Boston, in Medford, but we're gonna make this work, right?
We will.
Okay.
Some of this stuff will leak out in the future when it's time, but for now, let's move along.
Top
with the,
secret, private.
Sure, yeah. It's too secret to say secret.
It's C.
Like yes in Spanish.
I was thinking more like the sea, the ocean.
Right.
But yes, anyway, it's late. It's midnight.
Yeah.
But we got to get through this. So last week we established the importance of a routine and finding ways to avoid your squirrel moments.
Yes.
What's a squirrel moment?
I mean, it's not an industry term. It's
No,
not something that like is known, but everyone knows the famous scene from the animation
Pixar.
Pixar
Yeah.
Up, where the dog has got that robotic device on him and he's talking to his master and he's like da-da-da, and all of a sudden he's like squirrel, and he's completely distracted. So squirrel moment is just a moment where you are so focused in your story, so focused on what you're doing, but there's something that is hindering you and distracts you from the goal of the story.
And it could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be anything. It could be TV. It could be social media. It could be your phone.
Yeah.
It could be the fact that you didn't have breakfast.
Yeah.
And you've got a rumbling stomach.
Yes.
And I think last week we talked about the Hanes commercial with the stain on the shirt and the tag. And
Yeah.
And that, when you've got your stomach that's growling at you and yelling at you, hey, get something in me. That could be squirrel moments. Because then now you're getting up to go around your refrigerator. You're going in your cupboard. You're looking for Oreo cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could use an Oreo cookie. Right
I could use a lot of things right now. A pillow would be a starter.
So now, let's talk about this because this routine, we're talking about routines. This is a part of your writing process. Why is it a part of your writing process? Because it gives you confidence to begin.
Yeah.
A routine will enhance your productivity. Mm-hmm. A routine helps you establish boundaries as well, hard boundaries in order to avoid distractions, even boundaries to avoid procrastination. Mm-hmm. Now, we also mentioned that we have to be flexible with our boundaries, right? And understand that the routine is not the end, it's a means to the end.
Right.
It's just an aid. It's a tool, right? And for example, for us, like we have a routine. We have a routine for the podcast.
Yeah.
We have a very specific routine that we have set up. And
just not today.
Well, exactly.
It needs to be malleable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point, that your routine has to be something that helps you start, work, and end. It gives you a starting point and an ending point and the work that it's in between.
Right.
And the purpose of it is for you to have a focal, how this is going to happen, how it's going to work, how you're going to go through that work, and how you're going to end.
Right. And the setup, this process, all this whole thing. Even as we're here, we're noticing we have had a skeleton. We've had this bone, this structure, and we have this new location. And we're thinking, how are we going to be able to build this podcast setting for it? But we have this bone that we can work off of that has made it really easy to just let's set it up. Boom, boom. We know what you say. We have our script, bang, and we're able to get it done.
Yeah, I mean,
really quick.
For those of you that are watching on YouTube, we even did our overhead shot.
Yeah.
It's a little different, but the podcast begins with an overhead shot.
Yeah.
We get into our seats.
Yeah.
We introduce it, then we get going, and we tried to recreate that because that's our skeleton.
Right.
But the flesh is a little different, and it's going to look a little different.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it has to be malleable. And if your routine is such like a strict routine and you can't recreate it anywhere else, well then does that mean that you're not able to write anywhere else or to perform anywhere else, creatively? Like we said, it can't be the means, the end. It has to be the means to the end.
Right.
And in any instance, for example, you may be required to travel if you're a writer and you're on an assignment and you're working with a crew and you're on set and you're working with the director. You're not going to be in your comfy seat, in your favorite chair at your favorite desk in your quiet den space where you are comfortably writing at the perfect time of day with your cup of coffee. No, you're going to be on a hectic film set. You're going to be writing and rewriting dialogue in the middle of scenes being shot. You're going to be working with act. And so, it's like you have to understand yourself, really. Right. You have to set up expectations. You kind of have to set up, guidelines for yourself. And that's all a part of the routine. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, having said that, similar to routine that helps you begin writing, structure is something that a lot of writers will discuss as a necessity for quote-unquote good screenplays.
Yeah.
You'll hear that term thrown around, screenplay structure, story structure. What is structure? Now, Craig Mazin, whom some of you may recognize from the really popular podcast Script Notes, he's also, just finished writing, he's currently working on the second, or the film for The Last of Us. That's what he's writing right now. He also did Chernobyl.
Yep.
Anyway, he has a pretty interesting quote. He says, if you follow strict structural guidelines for your story and for your writing, in all likelihood, you will write a very bad script. Why do you think he says that? Why do you think that is?
I mean, just like a routine, there needs to be flexibility to a structure. A structure, again, is a tool, rules for your writing. They're what help you write good story, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the story, those rules can be
well, the rules are made to be broken, right?
And bent and flex where you can try to reinvent the wheel within the story.
Right. And so what's important is that you understand the rules, right, of storytelling so that you can break them.
Yeah.
But you can't break them without understanding them.
Right.
It's like, well, why am I not going to include an inciting incident in the first 10 pages? You better know. You better know darn well what it is that you're doing. If within the first 10 to 15 pages, you're not including an inciting incident for your character that sets them off on their journey, then you better know that you're breaking that rule and you're doing it on purpose. Because if you don't, what ends up happening is that it's like a skyscraper. Right? If you don't know what you're doing at the base and you don't know what you're doing with that foundation and you're off by 1 inch and you don't know why you're off by 1 inch, that you're going to think that you're building straight, and by the time that you get to your third, fourth, fifth floor, you're now no longer off by 1 inch. You're off by like 5 feet. Right? And if your story is an epic and you're like a skyscraper and you're on the 55th story, now you're the Leaning Tower of Pisa and you're about to tumble and fall apart. And that's why you got to know, like, okay, I'm going to skip this inciting incident. I'm going to put it somewhere else in my story. Like my protagonist, my hero is not going to go on their journey until later on. Well, make sure that that's purposeful. Make sure that you understand that. And yes, and then if that's the case, then break that rule. Heck yeah, go for it.
Right.
Go for it, but know why you're doing it so that you can correct your story so that it follows the right
And a lot
path.
of times people in the industry who break the rule, it's because they're saying something very important in their story.
Yeah, it's connected to their story.
It's actually the breaking of the rule is actually so purposeful to clarify the behavior of the character or the storyline. Even in cinematography, there's the same thing.
Yeah.
For instance, one of the things that we do is, there's this 180 rule where it's for you to have perfect juxtaposition of your camera, so that one camera A is pointing at one direction, camera B is pointing the other, and you can't cross this invisible line, because then there's this weird juxtaposition of the camera, and it looks opposites, and it just looks off.
It's following basically the proscenium, where it's like an audience looking, and the moment that you cross that 180 and you get onto the other side, you jar their spatial awareness, and now it's like the person is looking
completely
left,
thrown
they're
off.
looking right, they're like looking in the wrong direction.
The shot throws you off from the scene, but a lot of times cinematographers will break that rule. Why? Is because you're literally saying something is off in the scene. Something just got flipped, something just got switched. Pay attention. The whole world of this character just got put upside down, and it's purposeful. So the structure is there to guide you, but it can be broken if it tells a story that you want to tell.
Right, and it's the times that you're consciously breaking them is that you're making artistic decisions.
Yes.
You're making creative storyteller decisions. Like, my character is going to follow this path and this pattern and this rhyme and this reason, because I'm making story decisions that benefit the story, that benefit the characters, and it's going to make it a more dynamic telling. But you're understanding the journey that they're going through. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, and you're bringing them through it, and you're giving it rhyme, reason, structure. So
a lot of times, so for instance, as we enter into structure and start talking about, I believe, acts, one of the great films that I recommend our listeners and our viewers on YouTube to watch is Memento, which is a phenomenal movie that breaks the rule of linear writing and is able to start from, how's it go? It's like a U. He says he does it in. It's it starts from the end, and then in the middle of the movie, it's the beginning, and then from the middle back is like back to the beginning. I don't know how he explains it, but he explains it so well in one of his interviews about how he shapes it very differently and interconnects each scene as he goes on to try to tell his story, because if you know the movie, the character has lost his memory, so he's trying to remember, the murder of his wife. So it's perfect. It's perfectly done. It has to do with his story. It has to do with the loss of his memory. So we're tracing back, and we're going back to the beginning with him. But the movie's not written linearly.
Yeah, and you know what? Christopher Nolan is a master that he loves to manipulate time in all of his films. Time inversion now is the thing. Time travel, time inversion, space and time.
Yeah, it's his passion for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even Dunkirk, 3 different times. You've got land, sea, and air. And so he's a master storyteller in manipulating time, and so he understands. Okay, well, I don't need to write beginning, middle, end. I can write however I want as long as my character is going through this journey, and he's understanding that path that character goes, and then he can mix it all up however he wants. And you know what? Sometimes most people say they love it and they can follow it. There have been detractors that say, oh, like Inception. I'm like, I don't know. I just kind of tried to receive the spectacle of it all. I couldn't understand it, and that's a risk that you take as a writer. It's a risk that you take as a storyteller, right, and as him as a director. But he seems to have it down.
Yeah.
Now, screenplay structure is an important avenue, but this, just like your routine, is not something that should inhibit your ability to just let ideas flow. Don't think that because, I have to write in 3 acts, I've got these, this is the structure that Sid Field talks about, this is how I have to write it, and therefore, like, any ideas that fall outside of that structure just can't work because it's in this structure. No, remember, your characters are going to drive a lot of your story. Just like we talked about in the past episode, if you check out the last episode prior to this, we started to talk a little bit about this and how, the more that you develop your character and you start to understand what makes that character tick, what makes, if they open their refrigerator, what's inside, that kind of thing, like getting into the mind, the life, the past, the present, the future of your character. When you understand them, and you understand, and we do this a lot in research and development when we're researching our characters and we're kind of creating our story world and our characters and our background. Then we let go of all of that. We let it all go, and now we start to write the story, and we keep that in our subconscious, and we then allow the character to make new choices, but we now have a parameter. Mm-hmm. We understand who they were, who they are, and loosely all of us are in agreement, mm-hmm, of like what he would and wouldn't say, what he would and would not do, and then the story starts to take shape despite the amount of acts. Now, sometimes certain stories require 5 acts. Certain stories can be done in 3. Certain stories, can be done in 7. And we allow just kind of the story and the story shape and the story direction to guide and tell us that. Mm-hmm. Now, traditionally, we, Jonathan and I, because of our theatrical background, we write in 5 acts. That's Shakespeare's influence upon us. And we write in 3 and we write in 5. And it just depends on the story that we're trying to tell. And sometimes even when we write in 3, that middle act, that third act gets divided into 2 because you've got the midway point, you've got prior to the midway point and post. So that technically could even be called 4 acts, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why you guys, like to say, no, I only write in 3 acts, or no, I only write in that, like just be careful with that. Because as long as you just know the major points, like the major islands, like you've got to have a beginning, you've got to have an inciting incident, you've got to have a turning point, you've got to have a new world, and then how they navigate through that whole world, and they arc through that world, trying to reach their goal. They hit a central point, and then they come down from that central point, and then the world gets twisted one more time on them. Like if you understand those general directions for your character, for your hero, whether it's a comedy or a tragedy, once you understand those, like let that be kind of what guides the amount of acts that you're going to need, the amount of turning points, and the amount of conflict that you need to throw at your character in order for you to get to that final destination.
You have to understand that when you're writing this, your character is going through a journey, and however many acts that will take to achieve, the change of the character, or should I say the opportunities of the character to fulfill his early on desires, to the moment where his desires get shut down by an experience, which usually is that inciting incident that launches him into the new journey of that opportunity. And the new situations occur. So it's like you're taking your character through this journey, and it could be 3 acts, it could be 4 acts, it could be 5 acts, it could be 7 acts, as long as you are allowing the audience to connect to that character and go on that journey.
Yeah, they can follow it. As long as they can follow it, and you're staying within the parameters of what makes for a comfortable movie watching. Because sometimes, like people, if they're writing in 5 acts or 7 acts, next thing you know, they're writing like 300, 400
Yeah,
page epics. And I'm sorry, but like if you want your film to be viewed in a cinema, people can't sit in their seats for 3.5 hours. Like, I mean, think about it. If any of you have watched any of like Scorsese's most recent film,
Irishman?
The Irishman, like that was over 3 hours.
Yeah.
You know, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, over 3 hours, 3 hours and 15 minutes. Like, if any of you have ever watched any of those, like, you know, you got to pause it at some point and go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like, and the collective experience that we have, rather like our ability to just sit, you know, and pay attention, and you know, our attention to story is just as short.
Yeah.
And that comes back all the way from like when we would sit around the campfire. You know, you'd sit around the campfire, early civilization, and they would be talking about the hunt that they went on, or the kill, or, you know, the days, or even, you know, like, for example, Moses himself, as he would gather the children of Israel, and he would encourage them to tell each other the stories of, you know, of the first 5 books, and the story of creation, and saying, like, this word, let it not depart from your lips. You know, they'd sit around the campfire, and they'd tell stories, and even that has a shelf life. It's like, you know, or not a shelf life, but rather like a time span. You know, it's like you go, you've had your dinner, you sit around the campfire, you tell your story, that lasts, you know, X amount of minutes, and then it just kind of has a very natural end to it.
Yeah. They hit the most important points of the story. They're not going to bust out the Torah and start reading this whole thing during dinner. They'll probably read segments, and they'll probably summarize each story to just make sure that they hit all the important lessons of the journey of that particular character.
Right, and likewise, we do the same, you know, today. Like, think about it. Think about yourselves, you know, at a dinner party, and you're sitting down and you're telling a story. Like, how long can you actually go with your story? You know, it's the same rules apply to cinema. The only difference is you've got a captive audience, and you're keeping them there longer because of the spectacle. You know, but if it were just a person talking, you know, you got maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes before, like, people are like, I'm done.
Probably less today.
Yeah, probably less. The difference between them sitting and watching a screen and you talking is that you're also throwing in, you know, like, the spectacle, the visuals. Right. And so they're like, okay, you almost reset them. As a matter of fact, there's almost a supernatural like resetting that happens like at 20 minutes, or instinctual resetting at 20 minutes. If by 20 minutes in your film something exciting hasn't happened, people are going to start shutting down. And that is connected to our biological
and vice
past.
versa. I mean, people will even shut down because they're being stimulated too much, and the story that they need to take a break. Like, let me just take a break, and you have to figure that those break moments, even within your story structure, is like, this is where I calm the moment. This is where I kind of settle the seas, so that, you know, I can kind of bring the storm back in. So it's one of those things that you have to balance in your story writing.
Yeah. So now I'll just real briefly walk you through our typical 5-act structure and how we view it and how we look at it. Now, the most recent piece that we wrote was in 3. The one prior to that was in 5. We'll just talk about 5. Just because I have it in my notes and I put it up. All right, so the first act, you know, your character and character world, your protagonist and, you know, and your main characters, even in the first 10 pages, they're being set up. They're being introduced. And prior into, you know, breaking into the halfway point of that first act, or rather, you've got your inciting incident in those first 10 pages. What that is like that moment where something happens to your protagonist where they are set off on a journey. You know, they're immediately, like, something happens to them, something tragic or something, you know, eye-opening or something different that forces them to leave. It forces them to leave their world. It forces them to take this journey, to step forward, to move ahead, get out of there into this new world, right? At the turning point. And at this turning point, now in the second act, they're in this new world, and your character perhaps may be reluctant to change or to embark on that story's adventure, but they're compelled into this new story world. And then a turning point happens, and you're in the third act, and your character then encounters tests and allies and enemies, and this world is building and it's growing, and more conflict is coming upon and against him. They're tested in some sort of way, and at that midpoint in the third act, there's either a victory or a defeat that teaches them something really valuable, something that they need to know. Like, for example, in Voice, for us, like, there's a major halfway point. There's like a major baptism that happens, and and our main character is opened up to seeing this moment, and like that's now a tool, a weapon, or a tool, something that they carry into this next half of your screenplay. And so now you're in the fourth act, and your character will have to change in some way, but not enough. They don't change enough to achieve their goal and become a whole new person, like overcoming their flaw, but they have to change somehow. The protagonist's weakness is revealed in a very low moment of the story where things are worse than ever before. And this is like that crashing lowest point.
Sure.
It's the worst.
Yeah, it's like a major setback, you know, that kind of puts him back and rechecks, is he going to continue moving forward? Can he do it?
This is it,
Exactly. And it's a major turning point in the character's journey that, you want him to move forward, and they have to reevaluate kind of everything, their whole previous journey.
Right. And in that, and then so now here they're, as you said, they're spun into that fifth act, and where your story's resolved with the character changed, and either their goal is accomplished or there's some sort of a meaningful defeat. Now, the purpose of this ultimately is really to just you test your character out, you torture your character by throwing conflict at them, and conflict after conflict after conflict. Yeah. And as you continue to throw and build the conflict upon him, they have to make choices. And the more that your character makes on-screen choices, the more the audience gets to learn and to know and understand their characteristic, who they are. Like a person is known by the choices they make. Because it's not like a book where you can write their inner thoughts. Right. You don't have that kind of perspective in a film. All you can see is what they do. And so do they stand there? Do they rob the bank and get the money that they've been wanting and they've been, setting up this whole time? Or do they save the girl, And based on what they choose, either themselves or to save someone, then you're going to know, oh, this person is really, it's benevolent. They're going to, they have a heart for love. They're going to go to save the girl, if the protagonist is a man. Or if they rob the bank, it's like, oh, he's an outlaw, he's selfish. And so, based on those choices, you understand your character better. And now that he's made this choice, and then he chooses to rob the bank. Now he's at the bank. So what do you throw at the protagonist at this point? Police officers.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe police officers are there, and he or he wasn't expecting, I don't know,
I was saying that a little girl comes up to him and
snap.
Well, you know what I mean? You begin to introduce something that he wasn't expecting to be a block,
an antagonism,
in his
conflict,
some sort of moral standard that he's not willing to cross. And those are the things you have to realize, that you're throwing all those conflicts in there to reveal to the audience what type of person he is.
And these conflicts aren't just coming out of the thin blue. These are things that you've set up over the course of story. You've given the audience enough background about your character that at some point he's probably going to struggle with this.
Right. You open up with him kind of putting away a picture in his wallet. He has a daughter who he lost, but because of that he's angry, and he wants revenge on everything, on the system. And
so now this little girl shows up when he's about to shoot up everybody, and it's a major hurdling point because it reminds him of his daughter.
Right, exactly.
And boom, there's a conflict, and now he has to make another choice.
Yeah, put the gun down to let that save that girl from being injured in that robbery. And now you start to get compassion because he's broken down, and why he is the way that he is, because of the fact that he still has a heart. He's not just some criminal. He's just angry and suffering.
There you go.
And you've connected.
So now this story starts to splinter off, and you're making like a tree. It could have gone this way, it could have gone that way, but now it's going this way. And you keep throwing conflict at him that's connected to the story world, that's connected to his character, to his nature, to his past, to his inciting incident, and you keep messing with them and messing with them and messing with them until he changes and he arches.
Right, and then you start bringing other characters. For instance, this cop ends up finding out a new situation where he discovers that the father, that the daughter was actually murdered.
Yeah.
It wasn't that it wasn't
some random death.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
He ends up finding justice for the father while he's in jail, and you start realizing that you end up bringing new elements to the
new
story.
elements, new characters are brought in, and you've got a B
bring
story,
it into
a
it,
C
to
story.
bring you into that second, third, fourth act, and through into the climax, and then that resolution.
Right, and guess what? The story all along was about whether or not he will execute revenge. Right, it's a revenge story, or will he find forgiveness or be able to forgive, and whatever that end goal is over the course of this story and all of this conflict, this protagonist is trying to get to that end, and either he achieves it or he doesn't. Right. It's a puzzle.
It is. It's a puzzle, but like we're saying, this structure helps you think of things that easily. It's like you're able to bring out ideas a lot easier, a lot smoother. It just comes out because it's that this is what story is about.
And so structure is supposed to be kind of like walls and parameters, but not necessarily like walls and parameters that hinder your creativity. As a matter of fact, what's that saying? That necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so like when you create for yourself some parameters, it forces you to be really creative within those parameters. Like we said, it's a puzzle. What is the first thing, like your son, when he does a puzzle? Does he begin with the middle, or what do you teach him? You do the outer edge.
Do the outer edge,
right?
Yeah, because
it's the easiest. The corners are there, right?
It's on the outside.
And so then once you've got the outer edge, then you've got structure. Now okay, this is where the clouds are, so I can put some of the clouds down here. This is where the grass is, so I could do that. Mm-hmm. Here, here's Larry the cucumber's eyeball, and so now you've got the veggie tails growing.
Exactly. And then sometimes when the edges are all blue and it's one solid color, sometimes it's that clear image, the eyes, putting the eyes together and working from the mouth and out, because it's clear, clear image.
So that's what's good, like it's giving you those parameters with which to allow you to operate within them. Now, even though we have this structure for our final screenplays, the structure is more for organization, right? It's not to dictate our process. It's for the creation of the script, not for the creation of the story, right? Because that's very important. Because look, a screenplay at the end of the day, it has to be somewhere between 90 and 120 pages. I mean, you can go above that, and you can go under that. But if you're going to do that, number one, you better know why you're doing that, and it better be purposeful to that. And number two, you better be producing it yourself, because anything that goes over 120 pages, there are formulas that are out there, executives that have created these formulas that equate a certain amount of dollar value per page, a certain amount of dollar value per action sequence, per flipped car, and all of that stuff. Like it has a value and it has a cost. And if you're turning in a 180 page script, they're gonna be like, sorry, like unless your name is Scorsese or your name is Nolan or your name is, like Tarantino or something like that, they're not going to accept that. It's just not going to happen. And so the structure is there really for the screenplay aspect of it, not necessarily the story. Definitely never the story, I don't think anyway. But certainly for the structure of coming up with a document that can serve as a blueprint for everyone that's involved. Right. Because everybody needs this blueprint that can be read by everyone. I mean, over the course of however long Hollywood has existed, going back to, even the 20s and the 30s, this structure has developed over time to come up with kind of like this golden standard of what it is that works. It isn't the only thing that works. It's just what works most often for the most people. And it's what's been tried and proven. Now, you can break those. Or perhaps write in a different genre. Maybe you're meant to write in the short film genre. It's up and coming. There's definitely now a lot more platforms for short films. Quibi, just came out. I mean, there's a ton more platforms for short film, for short content. And so just find where you're comfortable in that world. And if you're finding yourself constantly writing above 120 pages and you're wanting to get into the mind of the character and write their thoughts, well, maybe you're a novelist. Maybe writing, novels is where, and writing in prose, perhaps, like that's where you belong. But anyway, having said that, in order for us to comfortably place all of our scenes and ideas into a structure, we have to rely on a few steps first that are not really strict and just allow our creative ideas to flow, right? Mm-hmm. This is a huge part of the collaboration process, because when you collaborate, you have to understand, if you can both come into an agreement and an understanding of, okay, well, this is where we're going. We have 120 pages. That means that we have X amount of cards. That means that by this card, we need to be in this scene.
Right.
We need to already be in this next section, in this next act. We need to be in this place. And so now we have structure that kind of guides us. It helps us. It funnels us in the direction that we want to go in, right?
Right. In that process, there's a lot of collaboration, working together. Yeah.
Now, our collaboration happens a lot through dialogue, right? We have to talk to each other about this. We have to talk to each other through this. We test and push the boundaries of the structures that we've created, whether it's the cards themselves. Sometimes we throw away entire sections. And it's through dialogue, especially for those of you, because I know that this specific podcast is even more so catered towards like the collaborative process of writing.
Right.
Dialogue is so important, and storytelling it out loud, like what we just did.
Right.
And we came up with this bank robbery scenario.
Right.
You throw a lot of nonsense out there, and you just make, and you test it out and see how it feels, and then you take notes on it, and you kind of build on it. Remember, all great storytelling, I mean, some of the greatest stories that have ever been told began as oral traditions. Beowulf. That was a story that was begun as an oral story that was told and memorized and passed on. Robin Hood, the Bigfoot, and the Abominable Snowman, or Little Red Riding Hood, or a lot of the stuff that, for example, you get from Germany. A lot of those folk tales and folklores from the Grimm's brothers, like a lot of that stuff began as oral stories and oral traditions, and so you yourself can practice in that as you're working the story element of it, which is different, obviously, than the screenplay element of it, when it's actually written down on paper.
And again, it goes back to being able to use that structure, that process, all that stuff it'll all come out naturally as you continue practicing, using these techniques and learning from the structure to be able to just bring out and brainstorm all these ideas out.
Yeah. Now, it's that, and as you do that, and these ideas do come out throughout this conversation, throughout this kind of like creative environment, you tap into things like the human condition. You tap into things that are, that connect us all, because we're talking from experiences. We're throwing ideas out there that are personal and unique.
About humans,
and that's how, that's how great stories are created, right? You figure out the why, and you ensure that the who, the what, and the where are all believable in your story. Like, well, why did he do this?
Yeah.
Well, who did he do it to? Like, what is it exactly that he's doing, and where did he do it? All of that stuff kind of builds the story process.
Yeah, you find out a lot of times all these movies, whether it's animations and about animals or about anything, whenever the reason why people love these things is because human wants to connect with a human, and I think that's that they're changing, they're giving animals human behaviors, human emotions, and that's why these movies are so successful, because it's simple. It's just you if you know the human condition, you can make movies off that, and that's what people desire to connect with.
Yeah, and that comes about as a result of our research.
Right.
Research of imagination, research of memory, research of fact. Now, this is episode 19, right? Go back to episode 18, the previous one, because we really dug into, talking about how you research imagination, memory, and fact. And that's important, because that's kind of how we develop our characters to being these human, believable people that we can connect with, we can relate to, we can be empathetic with, and kind of follow their story. And even if they're a terrible bad guy, there's a piece of them where you're like, yes, they're a terrible bad guy, but like I connect with them. You know, like I'm following their story. You may not like what they're doing, but you're just like, you're drawn to whom they are and how they're shifting and changing and growing for the better or for the worse. And you're invested. Again, through the research of imagination, the research of memory and fact. Go to episode 18 and check that out, because you're gonna there's a lot of nuggets there. There's a lot of good stuff with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, let's see. New topic. Kind of wrapping up this whole section of, you know, just kind of like the structure. Something that ultimately is really important is just kind of your organization.
Yeah.
And, you know, in order to stay organized through this discussion, you know, we used the note card method, right? Or rather, like, in order for us to keep our story organized and our stories organized, we do use that note card method. We talked about that in the last episode.
Yep.
And we also connected you guys to a video by Dustin Lance Black, who wrote, you know, the Academy Award winning film Milk. You know, and he has this video that he talks about the note card process and how he breaks it down and he goes through it and whatnot. And you know, we talked about that ourselves, but like that helps us stay organized. It's all about organization. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many techniques. I know even some of the guys in Film Right in their YouTube show, they have different types of the booklets and the circle story structure and organization process to get their story out. So there's a lot of different things. We prefer the note cards. People use sticky notes, and people just go straight onto the final draft and just write out beats just to organize it. And but it is important to, before you start writing out your story on script and start adding dialogue and action and all this stuff, you go right into any of that, that you first lay out just simple scene heading and what is this about? Yeah.
Now, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
When you are creating a story, right, as far as ideas is concerned, now we talked about character being what leads our stories, but like, how do you begin? Like, what's the first thing that's on your mind? Do you think of like a location? You're like, ooh, I would really like to write a story that takes place in the 1850s. Or do you begin with like an event that happens in your mind? You're like, oh, I want to see a bank robbery done this way. Or do you begin with a character where you're like, I've never seen a story about such and such person, you know, about a, you know, North Korean missionary that believes in Christ in an oppressive communist society. Like, what is it? How do you begin? How are you inspired to begin?
Personally, for me, so there is no right answer for this.
No, there isn't.
I think for anyone, it could be a simple, line of dialogue, a location, a beautiful location. Be like, I would love to make a movie off this location. I know that in the last few movies, a lot of times have been dreams I've had of just very supernatural, whether futuristic or whether it's something scriptural or something that God has shown me. I know that...
or comedic.
Right, or comedic, something that I woke up just laughing hysterically about, and I couldn't stop laughing. I'm like, you know, this would be a hilarious thing. You know, or other stories that have been out there that have been done, that I want to be like, well, what if this character experienced this thing, this whole new situation? I've never seen a movie about a character such as from this movie, similar to this movie, this character to be in a different scenario, you know?
Yeah.
And so, again, it really all depends. A lot of times, it's just a a passionate message that's in my heart that I want to share.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just as simple as that, writing a story based off this passionate message, this heartfelt message that I want to share.
Yeah.
So, again, there's no right answer, but
No,
I
there
think
isn't.
that
There isn't. For anyone, it could be anything.
yeah, a lot of times it could just be as simple as answering a question.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like, how do I answer the question of, I don't know, why do bad things happen to good people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you make
And
a
then,
movie revolving around that
absolutely.
answer.
And the more specific and detailed that you can get, the better your story is going to be, of course. Now, it's interesting because for me, I've had similar experiences. I've had like dreams, for example, where I woke up and I just couldn't shake it. And I tried to let it go. And I'm like, no, that's not a movie. That's just a dream. But then like it just comes back. And it comes back. And it comes back. And then I realized, there's something there.
Should have wrote that down.
No. I don't. It's not that I've forgotten it. It's that it continues coming back, and it's with me so often that I'm realizing if it hasn't died in my subconscious yet, if it hasn't disappeared, then there's something to this.
Sure.
There's something there that needs to be developed. And so when I have those experiences, then I'll write those down and I'll turn those into like a
because
story.
I've had experiences very similar when I had a dream and I woke up. And that very moment that I woke up, I was like, oh, that'd be an amazing dream. And then like a day later, I read that dream and I was like, why would I ever want to make that into a movie?
Like, that was terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it does happen to me. You have to kind of breathe it, mold it, figure out if there's something
Sometimes
there.
I just let it die,
or
let it go. And if it comes back, it's that saying, if you let it go and it comes back, it was meant to be. If
Cast
not,
it upon the waters.
Anyway.
If it returns in many days.
It was yours. But but sometimes for me, it's interesting because the most recent two pieces of works that I've written, for one for a writing assignment and the other one for ourselves for a speculative piece, came from an event.
Yeah. An
event. Like with Wade in the Water. This is some inside information now. I'm gonna drop some.
You better not leak it.
So I'm gonna. This is a spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But like with Wade in the Water, I was just thinking, how cool would it be if we had seen, a battle sequence that took place, between African slaves that are revolting, similar to like a Nat Turner's type of revolt, white. Landowners, supervisors and slave masters, and an Indian tribe. During the time where there was conflict between all three of those groups. And then all of a sudden, boom, an entire story.
And answering the question.
Like, what would happen? What would that look like? Who would be the players involved in that?
And what was God doing?
Yeah, and all of that molded together and mixed together. What what was God's purpose in all of this? Like you asked that question, especially like coming from a theistic perspective, you would think, what was God's purpose in this? And coming from an atheistic perspective, like looking at that, it's like, well, obviously there is no God because of X, Y, and Z, and like letting those two perspectives kind of clash, and us then putting in our perspective as men of faith, like, well, here's what we believe is happening, but not to try and indoctrinate anyone with theology, but just to like give a unique perspective that perhaps the audience hasn't considered.
Right.
It's like, perhaps you haven't thought about this. Let me parabolize it for you like this. This is what this world looks like. These are the key players. These are the key events. These are the individuals. Could this be? Could you see this? And be like, okay, well, when you present it like that, yeah, sure, perhaps it could, like, that could be a reason. And now you can dialogue about the things that you're passionate about and have conversation. And it's that kind of stuff. If it's pulled off well. It changes culture. It changes people. Like, people are willing to talk about it. They dialogue. I mean, everyone wants to talk about story. Everyone will be willing to talk about a good movie that they watched. Remember, like, you and I, we watched The Revenant, and we were talking about that closing scene.
Right.
And the fact, like, that battle closing scene. And we were just like, now we're talking about, is revenge right? Or is it not? And now we're talking, but we don't know that we're talking about these themes that the filmmaker put into it, but we're talking about those themes, and we're coming to terms and with understanding about, well, what does it mean to forgive? What does it mean to enact revenge? And we're talking about it through the story perspective, but that story and that dialogue that we're having is affecting our culture. It's affecting like what we hold as sacred or profane. What is moral, what is not. And it is guiding our, codes of conduct and behavior. And so the more that, you're storytelling and that you're writing these things, the more you're able to influence those kinds of conversations that shift culture.
Yeah.
All of this, all around, like, how do you begin your story? Like, what is it? And so after you've got this dream. You've got this dream and you know that this is where you want to start. What is the very next thing that you want to figure out?
Well, so that's actually a very tough question. The very next thing that I would want to figure out is, why does this need to be made?
There you go. That's actually really great. I don't think a lot of people think that way.
Yeah, because a lot of times, there's a lot that is being made.
Yeah.
And a lot of it
and 90%
stays,
of it shouldn't be made.
Right, and a lot of it stays exactly where it was made, right in that editing bay, and never gets made.
Well, and the stuff that does get made shouldn't have been made.
Right, exactly. So
a lot of things get begun and not finished, and a lot of things that get begun and finished probably shouldn't have been started.
Right, and a lot of times I know I ask myself that question. I know we do too. It's like, why does this need to be made?
Yeah. Should this be said? Should it be said by me? And should it be said now?
Right. And that's very, very big. If you look at our past films that we've done, they've been so timely in the climate of our culture, and the message has been so important for our generation.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful stories. They're parabolic. Yeah. They're not preaching. They're not teaching. They're
telling a very honest
They're guiding you in a life of an individual where we're making you, even to the point, crying for a wicked person.
Yeah.
Why? Why are we making you go on that journey to cry for a wicked person? Because we are humans in a fallen nature. And I think that when we're able to kind of see things in the eyes of God, through the lens of God, we realize that, things become more clear.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our way of writing. It isn't like you can, this is the only way.
No, but it's important. You ask yourself, like, should this even be made? Okay, right. So it's like, here you've got this dream, you've got this idea, you've got this great, concept, and you're like, should this be made? Should this be made into a story? Is this necessary?
Right.
Is it necessary to be told right now and by me?
Right.
And then if you decide yes, then now you're thinking, okay, who is going to be the vehicle that drives this story? Who's your protagonist or antagonist, And that's kind of the process for me personally. It's like, once I've gone through, I've got this idea, here's this great battle. Do I need to tell this story right now? Yes? Okay. Who is going to drive this? And that's kind of where now the whole thing begins to shape.
Yeah, because once you answer why this needs to be made, you get past the doubts of saying, oh, am I wasting my time?
Yeah.
You've formulated enough information for you to catapult you into creating it, because without a shadow of a doubt that it is a must. It needs to be made, or it's the will of God, or whatever the scenario may be.
And now you've got a concrete starting point.
Yeah.
Now you're thinking, okay, the vehicle to this now is my protagonist. Who is my protagonist that is going to carry the story forward? And then you start to flesh him out or her out, and you start to give them character traits and desires and blah blah blah. And now you're starting to build your world, and that's the whole point of story, is to build your world. You build your world, and you go in there. Does this person have a love interest, or does this person have a mortal enemy? And you just kind of build it and build it and build it and build it, and all of that with the aim to apply conflict to their journey to get from point A to point B. But that kind of happens, for us through conversation organically. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's good for for today, I think that's a good dose of information. I
You-
mean,
Your eyes are starting to get a little red. You look a little.
Oh no! I mean, I think that understanding those topics and understanding those points are really going to be very crucial. I mean, I think that for the person who begins this process, they have to be 100% confident, 100% sure.
Yeah.
They have to be fully convinced in themselves of the need of this story.
Yeah, because then why write it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is, I know I go through so many emotions when I write, bro. Like, I'm writing and sometimes I'm crying with the character.
Yeah.
Or I'm screaming at them, or I get frustrated because it doesn't sound right, or just the writing process in and of itself sometimes is frustrating. And then you get notes and then your heart is just shattered.
Yeah.
And ripped out of your chest and thrown to the ground. And so like you're gonna go through this period of agony and turmoil and joy and happiness, and so like make sure it's worth it.
Right. It's absolutely. It's like that scripture says where you beat yourself. Doesn't the boxer kind of beat himself, put his body through all this pain and suffering? Why? So that when you come out afterwards, you're strong. You're able to go and you persevere. So instead of waiting for the critiques to come for your content, you should have already beaten yourself up with it all, so that you know everything in your world. So others can't poke holes on it, And so you have to start off with that basic question: does this need to even be made? And then from there, there's so much that I'm sure in part 3 we'll talk about, that you add to all that. You keep adding, and then before you know it, you got yourself a solid story.
Cool. All right. Well, there is no creator's tip of the week this week. Yeah, you bummed out?
Yeah.
Did you have something?
Well, I'll save it for next week.
You did not have anything. You know what? I think I did. I do have one. And I just remembered. Okay. I didn't think I did, but I do have one, and I'll just give it. My creator's tip of the week is actually it's something that I just kind of happened upon. Oh. So we've been working on a couple of things, and I got we got the Adobe CC subscription.
Yep.
In order to go in and do a little bit of rotoscoping, and they have a pretty cool brush that can be used in After Effects CC, and so we got the month-long membership for it. We only needed it for like a short project, and I think it was like 1 or 2 days. Mm-hmm. I didn't cancel my subscription. It was just kind of going month to month, and I didn't even remember. I didn't realize, and here I am like paying for the subscription. It wasn't until I downloaded this app called Truebill. Truebill, you plug in just your routing number, you plug in your bank account, and it finds all of your subscriptions, everything and anything that you might be paying that you had no idea you were paying. It checks out all of your trends. It checks out of how you're spending. It can come up with budgets for you, especially for like freelance writers. Oftentimes freelance writers, you're using so much of the right side of your brain that you have no idea about your budget. Mm-hmm. Like you don't know like what's going on in your bank account. It's just a mess. Well, this app has, it's great. It's look, I know that people use a ton of different like really pretty solid banking apps. I also have obviously mint.com, that's probably
I've
one of the most popular banking apps. But like what I loved about Truebill that Mint I haven't figured out can do is that it found that Adobe CC, and it showed me, and it said, "Hey, you're paying for Adobe CC. Are you still okay with this?" And I'm like, "No." And I hit a button. I can hit a button, and it cancels it for me.
Oh wow!
Not all of them. Not everything can be canceled through the app.
But at least it warned you, and
some of them it'll warn you, but some of them you can just cancel it right through the app.
Wow.
So like if you've got some random subscriptions, it'll tell you, "Hey, are you still interested in it?" And so
out of that email.
Yeah. No, it goes through your spending, and it knows what categories like those expenditures are for.
Gotcha.
So, and if it sees it done more than once, it says, "Hey, you've spent the same amount of dollars on something 2 months back to back. This is a subscription. Do you want to keep it? Like it showed my Netflix. It showed all of that. And I'm like, no, Netflix stays. And I was like, what? CC? I'm still paying for that? It showed my Google Drive. It showed all that. So yeah,
that's
pretty
actually
cool.
really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because I know sometimes we subscribe to all sorts of stuff and we forget.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we definitely do.
So this is, it's called True Bill.
Yeah.
True Bill. It's pretty cool. I like it.
I got one.
Oh.
I
do.
I downloaded it specifically for this production that we're in because we wanted to know certain information. So a lot of times I scour the app stores to make sure that I have all the apps for production ready apps. So basically they help you kind of know certain things, know the sun movement, know lenses, know what did I say in the past? I have them all here.
Light meter.
Yeah, exactly. Focus charts, the shot designer, getting all that stuff, equipment, things like that. One thing that I completely forgot to mention in the past, is a weather app, but not just any other weather app kind of telling you, on your phone what's the weather, but an actual Doppler radar. And giving yourself a good Doppler radar to find out, and there's a really, really good one. It's called NOAA app that basically gives you a clear view of the Doppler radar, just knowing what is coming, rain, things like that. But it's NOAA. It's really good. It's free and it's got very good ratings.
Changes shows you if there's air pressure changes,
exactly.
so like a storm is coming in.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
So it's very clear on what's coming, and it's free.
Does it show you if it's going to be like a overcast, cloudy day, that kind of stuff, so that you can
It
prepare?
shows you the cloud movements. It
That's
shows
so cool.
you, precipitation percentage, all that stuff, so and it shows you the actual cloud of rain that's coming down. So
how big it
Doppler,
is,
nice
how
Doppler
long.
radar, how big it is and stuff like that. So how long it lasts, how fast it's moving, when it's coming, how close you are. So for instance, you're wrapping up your equipment, you're like, we have literally a few more minutes, this thing is arriving, and then you can
I like it. Doppler.
prepare. Yeah.
All right. True Bill and Doppler radar.
It's it's NOAA. Let me see.
okay.
It's NOAA Weather. Yeah, so check that out.
Cool. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so very much for catching us on the harvest. I know this week is a little different, and so even our structure is a little different, and our closing is a little different. Everything's a little different.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for watching. My name is Xavier Garcia, and you can find me on Twitter at xgarcia.
Yes, at Jonathan Harvest.
And for any longer questions that you may have for us, info@mountharvest.com. Write to us and we would love to answer them. As a matter of fact, we're aggregating questions, and I think we're going to do one episode where it's just Q&A. And we're just going to answer questions. We also would love to start getting into some script discussions.
Yes.
We would love if you guys have screenplays and you want them discussed on the podcast. We could totally do that. What
Particular
we'll do is
scenes, anything that you want us to look at.
We'll give you a little bit of structure. So if you were to write to us on info@mountharvest.com, we'll send you a set of instructions of what it is that you're supposed to set apart and set aside in order for us to do it, because we're probably only going to do like 5 pages or so on the show. But yeah, any of that stuff, write to us, info@mountharvest.com. You could also check us out at the Patreon. That's patreon.com/The Harvest Podcast, and you can check out all of our episodes that are on there, and some behind the scenes stuff, and you can become a patron. And and if you loved what you heard and you want to support, you can totally do so there. And it just goes back to the production quality of what we're doing. We know we want to get one more. We're gonna get one more mic, because we're gonna start having people in studio joining us and things like that. And that's what the money goes towards.
Right.
It just goes right back to the podcast.
Yeah.
So,
and if you liked what you saw and you want to continue watching more stuff, please subscribe, smash that like button,
Boom.
as they say, and please share the video. So
I like how
we
you
can
did
get more of these going. Want to continue?
Smash it.
Beat it. It'll be a new word. Smash it. That one's. I'll do it next. Better.
Beat that.
Beat it.
Beat that. Yeah.
And then it'll be something else next week. We'll find out.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Join us at thepatreon.com/The Harvest Podcast for some BTS footage of our cinema production life.